In this video, we are talking about 10 players that you must start in week 6 of fantasy football. But before we get into it, take a look at this graphic as it shows that just 8% of you who are watching my videos are subscribed to the channel. So if you could please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, like the video, I'd really appreciate it. Starting at number 10 with Tank Bigsby, here's the deal. If you spent all of that fab to get Bigsby on your team, with all the injuries that are going on right now, 4 teams on bye, you are starting Tank this week. Like, how can you not, as he's one of the hottest backs in all of football right now, as he ranks first in explosive run rate, first in yards after contact per attempt, first in yards per carry, third in missed tackles forced per attempt. Like, even with ETN, who's probably going to play this week, dealing with a shoulder injury, it doesn't matter. Tank still needs to be in your lineup. He's earned a larger role. The Jaguars would be foolish not to give him a ton of touches, a ton of opportunities on Sunday against Chicago. And remember, Travis is now battling a shoulder injury for 2 weeks straight. What happens if he makes it worse during the game? Or maybe he doesn't play a ton because it's continuing to bother him, or he can't finish the game. Who knows? Like, Bigsby is going to be involved because of ETN dealing with that injury, and because frankly, he's the better running back at this point for Jacksonville. And while the matchup isn't ideal, 68% of Tank's runs this year have been man gap concepts per fantasy points, and the Bears have been much worse against man gap runs, allowing 5.7 yards per carry. So yes, on paper, the matchup doesn't look great to most people, but I think the Jaguars are still going to be able to exploit the Bears on the ground. Bigsby is going to continue to play at a very high level, and he is going to be in for another big day. I think he's going to be the reason a lot of people win their matchups this week. At number 9, Jayden Reed had his worst game of the season with Jordan Love under center, and he still scored 13.7 fantasy points. That's a pretty good floor if you ask me. But Reed has been absolutely dominant with Jordan Love, averaging 24.6 fantasy points per game. It's very evident at this point that Reed is the alpha in this Green Bay wide receiver room. And not only that, but he's looking like one of the best receivers in all of fantasy as he ranks first in fantasy points per route run. Reed's versatility and usage make him a must-start option every single week. So you're probably like, Ryan, why is he even on this list then? Because I think he's going to go nuclear this week in week 6 against the Cardinals. It's a really good matchup, similar to what we thought against the Rams last week, but LA changed up their corners last minute on us, which made it a little more difficult on the Packers receivers last week. But this week is another beautiful matchup against the Cardinals, who are top 10 in yards allowed to wide receivers, and a game that has high scoring potential. We know the Cardinals do have a good offense. They've been kind of stalling out as of late, but both teams have potent offenses. It could be high scoring, along with questionable defenses at times. That makes for the perfect recipe for a high fantasy scoring game. I think Reed is going to go absolutely crazy in week 6. He had a down week last week, 13.7 fantasy points if you call that a down week. But it's going to be a different story this week, as I think Reed has 20, 25, 30 fantasy points in his range of outcomes. At number 8, Tony Pollard is the workhorse back in Tennessee and should eat coming out of a bye. Pollard is the RB18 in fantasy, averaging 18.6 touches and 83 total yards per game, while seeing 64% of Tennessee's offensive snaps, and has scored 15 plus fantasy points in 3 out of 4 games this season. And Pollard has looked really good this year, as he's now finally fully healthy, ranking 7th in yards after contact per attempt. And the matchup against the Colts is as good as it gets, as the Colts have allowed the 4th most rushing yards and 5th most receiving yards and 9th most fantasy points per game to running backs. So I think Pollard is going to have an all-around really strong game on the ground, through the air, and mark it down, book it. He gets in the end zone once again in week 6. At number 7, Chris Godwin has kind of cooled off over these last 2 weeks after coming out of the gate on fire, but he's still the wide receiver 8 in fantasy, averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game. This is a guy we talked about this offseason who's going to have a little bit of a resurgence of a year under offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, as he got moved back into the slot, which is his natural position, full-time this year. we were expecting this breakout type of season for Godwin, as he's second among wide receivers in yards after the catch, along with a 32% first read share, which leads the team. A lot of this is Godwin being out of the slot, Baker not throwing to Rachaad White as often, and Godwin being Mayfield's checkdown guy, security blanket. It's really working, and Chris has really benefited from this new scheme and from White just not being that involved and not being as good this year as he was last year. And you know what week it is. Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore, these guys hate each other. Lattimore is going to be shadowing Evans everywhere he goes, meaning Godwin is going to be in a lot of good spots. He's going to be open often. And Baker's probably not going to want to test Lattimore too much, potentially, if he's really locking up Evans. So I think Godwin has another big day against the Saints, who are also allowing the 5th most receiving yards per game to slot receivers. So if you're on the fence, do I put Godwin in? Do I not? Plug him in your lineup because he's going to go off. At number 6, Trey McBride. When we drafted McBride this offseason, we were expecting bigger games at this point, and we just haven't really got it yet. His only touchdown of the year is the one where one of his teammates fumbled and he jumped on the ball. I believe it was James Conner. That's his only touchdown of the year. That changes this week. Kyler Murray has been looking for McBride early and often all year long. He kind of dropped a touchdown red zone pass last week, but McBride still leads all tight ends in target share at 26% and has earned 115 targets over his last 14 games. Arizona will likely be chasing points against a really good Green Bay Packers offense. And if Green Bay's stud corner, Jair Alexander, is back, he's been out the last couple of weeks, he's going to be all over Marvin Harrison Jr., which means that Murray's probably going to look for McBride even more than he already does. If you're looking for a sneaky sleeper, Michael Wilson is a guy to keep on your radar if you are really desperate. And the Packers have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends. So if you drafted McBride in round 4, round 5, and haven't really felt great about that selection, he's going to make you feel really good about having him locked into your tight end spot this week. At number 5, Terry McLaurin is starting to cook with rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. They look like they're really building a chemistry over these last 3 games, as McLaurin is averaging 17.2 fantasy points per game and is the wide receiver 13 in fantasy, while racking up 2 touchdowns and 2 100-yard games over that 3-game stretch. McLaurin has also been a target hog. Like, why wouldn't he be? There's not many other options in the passing game, as he's rocking a 26% target share, 55% air yard share, and a 31% first read share. You got to feel good for Terry, right? He hasn't had a quarterback in any of his NFL seasons, and he finally gets one, and he is playing really well, which is what we'd expect because we know the talent Terry has. He's just never had a quarterback. Finally gets it. Really good for him. And this week against Baltimore, I'm expecting it to be a competitive game. Like, the Commanders are legit. And a couple things we know about this Ravens defense: they will stop the run very well, but they are a pass funnel through the air, something you wouldn't expect when you think about the Ravens, but they just haven't really been good at stopping the pass, as they've allowed the 3rd most yards to wide receivers. So start Terry with confidence. It's going to be high scoring. I think the Commanders are going to have to throw to keep up with Lamar Jackson and company. So I really think Terry is just going to explode this week. At number 4, Tyrone Tracy Jr. Now, this is only a start if Devin Singletary is out, obviously. It's looking like Singletary is trending to miss Sunday Night Football, but keep an eye on the practice reports, keep an eye out on Schefter's tweets, just to make sure. But if Singletary is out, which, like I said, it's looking like that's going to happen, Tracy is a really good running back. Last week, 18 carries, 129 yards, 14 fantasy points, and was the only running back in the NFL to gain positive yardage on every single run in a game, with 15 plus rush attempts so far this season. Like I said, really good back on a better Giants offense that's going to be down Malik Neighbors. So Tracy is going to be the focal point. Daniel Jones is playing pretty solid football this year. This offensive line looks like it's a step above what it was last year. So those are all good things for Tracy because they're going to be in good spots. Maybe he'll have a couple goal line opportunities. Maybe he'll get in the end zone. Actually, I'm calling a Tracy touchdown on Sunday night. I'm completely fine plugging him into your lineup. If you're really desperate at running back or need a flex, he is your guy. Against the Bengals, who have allowed the third most rushing yards per game to running backs. Now, the only concern I have here is if the Bengals get up big early and the Giants are forced to pass, they should use Tracy in the passing game, but they might not. And if they don't, he could give you a dud. But we don't play fantasy to be safe, right? We live on the edge. You got to take chances if you want to win your matchups. And if you are a risk taker, which I think you should be at times, then plug Tracy into your lineup, who's a young, talented, explosive back that I think, like I said, scores on Sunday Night Football. At number 3, Chris Olave has not been great with Derek Carr under center. It's been the Rashid Shaheed show, who feels like Carr's preferred receiver to throw to, but Derek Carr is now going to miss several weeks, unfortunately, with an oblique injury. And insert rookie quarterback Spencer Rattler, who's already come out and said this week that Olave is a really special receiver, and when he's on the field, he's going to target him as much as he can. So I think it's going to be a sneaky good game for Olave, who has been disappointing this year, especially with where you had to draft Chris if you wanted to get him on your team. But we know the type of talent Olave has. While this could carry some risk, similar with the Tracy situation, we don't play fantasy football scared, A. B, yes, there could be some uncertainty with Rattler, rookie quarterback, getting his first start. It could be a mess, or it could be a really good thing for Olave because he'll finally have a quarterback that will throw him the football. And the Saints are going to have to pass a ton to keep up with the scorching hot Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. It's a good matchup on paper, too, against Tampa Bay, who have allowed the 9th most receiving yards per game to perimeter wide receivers. So you're not benching Olave, right? You probably don't have a better option with all the buys, with all the injuries. So get Olave in your lineup. Don't play scared. And I'm calling 15-plus fantasy points for him this week. At number 2, Bucky Irving. Rachaad White listed out due to an injury, which is tremendous news for the explosive rookie running back who was already eating into White's workload these last couple of weeks. And now Bucky gets this backfield to himself, and he has been tremendous this year with the opportunities that he's had. 7th in explosive run rate, 6th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 13th in yards after contact per attempt. Now on paper, the matchup is not great against the Saints, but you got to play Irving. You don't get many running backs these days who are going to see a lot of work, who are really talented, who are nice players on the ground, can catch the football. That is Bucky Irving, and with Irving playing at such a high level right now, he needs to be in your lineup. I don't care about the matchup. Trust the player, trust the talent, trust the Tampa Bay offense to still be able to move the football, and I think Bucky is going to have a big game because he's flashed his skill set, his talent. With White on the field, what is he going to do now that he has the backfield to himself? I think it's going to be a big eruption for the rookie running back. At number 1, Tank Dell. He made my breakouts list. Go back, check out that video. But yes, it's been a rough start for Dell. Wide receiver 70 in fantasy. Not what you were expecting when you drafted him after coming off a really good rookie year, but really quick. Coming off that gruesome leg injury, he got shot in May of this year, so he's recovering from all these injuries. He doesn't look like the same player right now. He's lacking explosiveness, maybe lacking some confidence, and so that's been disappointing, and it's showing up on the football field. But he's going to get better every single week. No Nico Collins for the foreseeable future. Just don't forget about the player that Dell is. From weeks 9 to 12 last year, he was the wide receiver 3, averaging 20.5 fantasy points. Don't forget about the chemistry that he has with CJ Stroud. The connection these two guys have is phenomenal, and his quarterback is really good. The offense that he's on is really good. Stephon Diggs is going to see a lot of stud corner. Christian Gonzalez, who follows all elite wide receivers and pretty much locks him down, as Gonzalez has followed Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, and Brandon Ayuk. And only DK Metcalf finished with more than 60 receiving yards in his coverage out of all of those guys. So Gonzalez probably going to be all over Diggs, meaning Dell is going to be in a lot of good positions with no Nico Collins. Like, this is the week he goes off, even if he, is not the same player, not as explosive. I just think with sheer volume alone, and with Stephon Diggs dealing with a really good corner that Dell needs to be in starting lineups because of his situation, because of the quarterback that he has, I think he's going to have a monster game in this one. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from the video, if you could please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know, and I will see you in the next one.